Greetings, everyone. It's a pleasure to welcome you to the conversation on Creative Society TV. Now we are living in a really special time when we all people have a chance together to make a change and build a society that we all deserve to live in. If you still don't know about the Creative Society project, please visit the website creativesociety.com. There you will find all the information, interviews, and international conferences. Especially, I would like to mention the last conference, Global Crisis, Time for the Truth, which took place on December 4th, 2021. And at this conference, the truth about the crisis of modern society, the true cause of climate change, and the real way out were voiced. So today we also will watch a video from the conference. So stay tuned and be with us.
So today we are glad to welcome our esteemed guests and learn her opinion on the topic which actually concern everybody. Jarrell Chambers, bloggers, All Things Iceland podcast host. So I would like to actually start with the first question for you, Jarrell. And please share with us how you started to be a blogger, what inspires you in these activities and in life in general.
Definitely. Well, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and to kind of share with everyone about my experience coming from the United States and now living in Iceland for almost 6 years. And when I first moved in 2016, I had no intention or no idea that I would be founding and creating content about Iceland. It was more about just adjusting and enjoying the fact that my husband, who's Icelandic, was, very much adamant that he was going to come and live back in his country. He's a psychologist in order to kind of help the people here because there are not a lot of male psychologists in general in the field. And when he told me that while we were living in the US, I was just like, sure, that sounds fun. I'll move to Iceland, even though I had no idea about Iceland, not in terms of even like how far it was from New York. And come to find out, it's not that far away, only a 5.5-hour flight. But after living here for some years and working and marketing for a travel adventure company, I really got a chance to see the country and, of course, integrating with his family and them becoming my family. I realized that there were so many things about Iceland that are really intriguing. And then, of course, people asking me all the time, like friends and family, like, what's it like, culture wise, and what do people expect from you, or how do they treat you? And so I decided, after I had been listening to a ton of podcasts, that I would look for podcasts that was talking about this type of experience, or at least about Iceland, but I didn't see one. So I thought, maybe I should start a podcast. I don't know, right? Is this a good idea? And I really thought about it for a while. And then in 2018, I just went for it. And I've been doing it ever since. And it went from being just a podcast to a YouTube channel. And then, of course, the other social media channels like Instagram and TikTok and all these places. And I'm surprised all the time. And people are like, oh, your content helped me so much to understand Iceland or to travel there or something. Because a lot of the time, now we're sitting in our respective places talking what seems like into the void, but people are there. They're listening. They're hearing us. There's an impact happening. And I think what has helped me the most is knowing that I'm helping other people to get a better understanding. So All Things Iceland covers literally all the curiosities you can have regarding Icelandic language, culture, history, and of course, travel, but all of that gets integrated into it. And that's been a huge part for me, is connecting with this culture that's not something I was born into, but that I still feel very connected with anyway.
Yeah, that sounds really wonderful and just becoming interesting. What inspires you the most about Iceland? When you learn about it, about people, culture, what may be something most precious for you?
I think the initial thing was the nature. I was just so shocked at how gorgeous it is. I grew up in New York City, which is called the concrete jungle. And it is not somewhere where you have gorgeous mountains covered in snow right outside of the city. You can see them. I literally look out my window and I can see the mountains, or going on a hike or something is not that close to you. But then when it comes to people, like I've experienced many different things in the US, and with Gunnar's family, who looks so different than me, right? I didn't know what to expect. And to be honest, they embraced me like I'm family. I am family to them in terms of marrying into the family, but it didn't feel like I was this weird outsider coming into their family. I felt like I was a person who's also an intellect and an intellectual, and they gravitated towards that. And we would have really fun, meaningful conversations. They were so excited my first trip when I could say Icelandic words in like colors of things. It was literally like I was a child. I was like, blár, which means blue. And they were like, yeah. You know? So just me trying to meet them halfway. So I'm coming to their country, trying to understand, I'm so new to everything. It's like, your eyes are wide open. And I think that openness to me, meaning like them being so readily wanting to make me feel accepted and happy here, made a huge difference in me feeling comfortable and moving here.
That's great. I think it's always nice to feel welcome into a new country that you never heard of before, actually. So my next question actually is kind of related to this. People's appearance is sometimes not what we think a normal person should look like if we are into our own community. So how important it is to see in people things that we have in common?
Definitely. I think there's importance to both, meaning like people have their individual cultures and there's differences, but then the fact that we're all humans and the fact that we go through the different stages in life. We were sad, we're happy, we're excited, we're, needing assistance. We all have these basic needs of food, shelter, all of that. And that to me, I think is, at least it feels like in Icelandic society, there's a general understanding of the fact that there shouldn't be people who are in need this way, right? Like, whereas I look in the US, the gap of people who are extremely poor or extremely rich is so large. And it's almost to the point where it just doesn't seem like it should be possible that people are living in poverty in what's supposed to be like the greatest country, the greatest country in the world. And so like there is often, when I travel back to New York or like in parts of the US and I see this, I'm just like, wow, it feels like a country I don't understand or know, even though I grew up there. I get it to a degree, but then I'm like, no, but that doesn't have to be how it is. And not to say that Iceland is perfect at all, but there at least is a community aspect. And it feels like people have a better, or like they want to feel like people should be looking out for each other. And for instance, I'll just give you a random example. Like I remember one of the trips when I first came, we were riding to the Golden Circle, which is an area of Iceland that many tourists go to. But since it was my first time, they were taking me. It was Gunnar and his friend. And there were these people who were on the side of the road and maybe something was wrong with their car. We didn't know. But Gunnar's friend, Dotte, stopped his car. He was like, let me just check and see. Right. And it's just how he is. And it was just like, oh, and they got out and they helped and they called and they come to find out they did need help. But it was just like no, hesitation to be like, let me come and help you. Or like there were some people here and we've had a lot of storms this winter who were like, yeah, I was digging out a lot of people and stuff like that. And it's just like, yeah, if I were in New York, there's no way someone is probably coming and help dig out. Not to say not that New Yorkers aren't helpful. I've helped plenty of people in the subway when I can see the confused look on their face when they're looking at the map. But most of the time, so many of us are so busy going about our day that we don't really think of each other as being a connected group of individuals that could help each other. Rather, we're just like, stay out of my way. There's, millions of you all here in the city. I just want to get to where I'm going and not feel like I'm jam-packed with everybody. So it sometimes comes across as a small town rather than a place that has this city, because so many people, especially if you speak Icelandic, things change for you there too. Like I went to the store today and the guy was very happily directed me to another store, even though it would have meant his store was losing business, but I would have gotten better service. And I was like, thank you. So things like that, they're just kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's really very interesting. And when you were saying about help, we often can see it's so natural for us when we see someone who needs help. But sometimes this kind of, distance, maybe we'll learn it like, okay, how people will think or something like that. But it's really wonderful when we openly communicate with each other. Mm-hmm. And now just let's watch a short video. It's from the conference, Global Crisis Time for the Truth. And I think it's also related to relationship between people. So let's watch it.
humanity, various races, nationalities, religions, but we are all sailing in the same boat in this ocean of life. And the course of all-absorbing consumerism, which our common ship has taken today, is leading us to precipice. Just a little longer, and we will irreversibly fall into the abyss of economic, social, and climate catastrophes. Perhaps someone doesn't want to see and admit obvious facts, yet being afraid to turn around and see the reality. In the endless rush, in the ordinary everyday routine, in the race for success and survival in this world of consumerism. But every day, more and more people stop and ask themselves these questions. Where is this world coming to? What does the future hold for me and my children? How can I make sure that the world will be a safe, happy, and prosperous place? After all, no matter how successful you are, if the whole world is falling apart, there is no way you can avoid a bitter fate. We can change the course of our ship, which is speeding into the abyss, and instead of the abyss of consumption, steer it in the direction of the creative society. But we can do this only together. We need to unite our collective human potential, become a united civilization, and row in one direction. Uniting in a common goal, we need to direct our attention, our efforts, our knowledge, and our skills to charting a new course. And how quickly we can do this depends on the choice of each person. Our salvation is only in our unity. Only by working together can we build a truly decent world. A world that will have a future for us and our children. And that is the creative society. We still have a chance. So let's take it.
So, dear Jules, would you like to comment on this video?
Yeah, I think overall the message is one of unity, it sounds like, and understanding that, I mean, it doesn't outrightly say it, but kind of greed and power hungry in this is not the way, but rather kind of banding together and making it so that our world is something, first of all, that we're saving from being destroyed from the climate, but also I think just in general, like the morals and principles that we live by are ones that usually need to shape from being one of selfishness to, combined effort throughout. And I think a lot of this comes from, and I think I mentioned this in the previous, when we were just kind of talking about this whole interview and conversation, that even just having nations, there's nothing wrong with us like having like specific lands and stuff, but the fact that like borders are kind of like closed off to people who need, I mean, many people have had to flee their homes in different times. I mean, even in Iceland, it's happened where there was like a mini ice age and 25% of the country left and moved to Canada. Some people moved to Brazil. And imagine if like nowhere else had been open to them, right? And it's just the idea of refugees or being displaced just because of climate or economic status or the fact that there are people out there who cause wars. All of these are issues, and continuously in our world, we're picking and choosing humans to say whether they're okay to help or not to help. And I don't think that should ever be a question. And just from coming from a place where I've seen the disparity so clearly and the discrimination so clearly, it's something that I do believe is necessary in order to move towards a more unified place and unified world.
Great, thanks. Thanks for your feedback on that video. I think you're definitely spot on the interpretation of this video. If you think about the future, how will you envisage a creative society or a better society? What do you think should be the common goal that this society wants to achieve, and what it should look like?
Yeah, I think one of the hugest things for me is this idea of how much people are worth and their value. So we have people who are like trillionaires or something, and then we have people who work hours upon hours every day, and they get paid pennies in comparison. And I remember I went to Bali, and this struck me so strongly. My idea was of going on vacation, getting to see this other culture, but I just felt like, how is it that this person gets up 4 o'clock in the morning to go pick durian fruit to sell in the market and is there for 12 hours in the day and has made a couple of dollars in the currency that I have? And I sit at a desk, not to say that my work doesn't have any value at all, but like, it's bizarre to think that lifestyle wise, access to information, technology, access to any resources that could make their lives easier, and they're not literally breaking their backs day and night, is in essence denied because of where they happen to be born and the currency that their country holds, and how that's devalued across, when you compare it to other places. And it's like, what? This is horrible. And, I spent so much time thinking about like, why is this the case? Or why is this even allowed? And it kind of comes back to this idea of they're wanting to be people who feel like this is how society is, when instead of, no, it was how it was shaped by some people, a very small amount of people. And I personally don't believe that it should be this way. I do think there needs to be more kind of equal spread in terms of this access. The whole idea of money too is this kind of funny thing. And I'm not saying money can't exist, but it is a very like tricky thing when it comes to everyone having a different type of currency and whether or not it's considered more valuable or not, depending on a lot of the times predictions rather than the actual reality of the situation, or the, saying my time is more valuable than yours. So that's just one way that I see it.
Yeah, that's true. And it looks really in our consumer world like something is really wrong. Because first of all, we're all human, and no matter where you're born, you need to have the same access to everything. So, and as we know, you read the article with 8 foundations of the creative society. Could you please share your opinion about that? What maybe impressed you the most, or what you would like to share?
Yeah, I think human safety and things like transparency are really important, because it depends on where you are. But like feeling safe as a person in general, it shouldn't be a question, but rather just how it is. That should be the default. And the fact that most people are fearing for their lives for different reasons, whether it's the patriarchy, whether it's because of abuse and or even laws in your country that make it so that you can be unsafe. These are aspects that are really concerning to me. And when it comes to transparency, often it is the case that we're not aware of what's going on, and it's said to be for our better good. But if you're not aware of what's happening, how can you make informed decisions about what you want to do or how you want society to go? And we're often electing officials who promise that they have our best interest at heart, but they're not necessarily expressing to us what their actual interests are, even though they said that their interests were those of the people that they represent. But once they get into office, that changes. So yeah, I think things like that, at least, are the things that pop out to me. And I don't remember which one, if this would apply to, but maybe it's the safety part, but like healthcare. Like this should be just in general, again, not something that we wonder if it's possible, but it should be that everyone has access to being able to see a doctor, getting medicine, affordable medicine. Like living in Iceland, for instance, has been a huge difference for me there. I remember being a freelancer in New York at one point, and the amount I was paying for insurance, like the minimum was $300 a month. And this is before Obama had put in Obamacare as the, had gotten that passed through. But even still, it's just like, this is ridiculous expensive for somebody who's like freelancing, doing work, and for hardly anything. I still have to pay a certain amount of money when I go to the doctor. Whereas here, when I go to the doctor, I pay maybe like $5. Like it's so inexpensive. And if I want to go see a specialist, they actually recommend that you go see specialists at the same time, because there's a certain cap on the amount of money that you can spend on medical expenses in Iceland before it just becomes free. And it's like, oh, well, that's nice. When you find out these kind of little tidbits of like, what? That's not how that ever has worked anywhere else that I know of. but that's just how it's different here. And the fact that like people shouldn't be going bankrupt for like having a baby, and in the US, if you don't have insurance, it can cost you like $20,000 to have a child. Why is that even the case? And then sometimes if your employer doesn't have leave for you, like maternity leave or paternity leave, then you're put on disability for being out of work as a mother, right? It's just like, it's outrageous to think of this. Whereas in Iceland, like it's a very different, and in a lot of Nordic countries or European countries, it's very different, the thinking process around this specific situation and sometimes healthcare.
Great, thanks. And thanks for your actually view of two different worlds almost, from the Icelandic view and the US view. It's nice to be able to compare. I'm glad also that you brought the fourth foundation about transparency and openness of information for all, because I think since you're a blogger, you can almost shape public opinion on the topics that you're mentioning in a good way, if you want to do it in the right way. So can you tell us maybe a little bit more about this really foundation about transparency of information through your work, and also how, maybe more in general, how to keep information transparent, truthful, and also to make it accessible to all?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I try my best. I have to be honest, though, my resources are the news, which is filtered. So, I can only be as transparent as the sources that are transparent with me, I guess. But it's funny that I started a segment on Instagram, and I've also now am trying it on YouTube, in which I talk about the Icelandic news. And that was not something I initially thought to myself, this would be a popular segment or people would care. But when I started doing it on Instagram more than a year ago, I was getting all these messages being like, thank you so much. I'm so glad that you're telling us about the news in Iceland, like people who don't live here. And then there are people who live here, Icelanders, who go, I like watching you say the news rather than the like stiff newscaster, because at least you're making it like more fun. Because I try my best to have, news that sometimes is a bit somber, but then also news that maybe is uplifting, something interesting that's happening, so that we always don't feel like we want to cry after listening to the news. And because a lot of the times it is something, there's a lot of unfortunate things that are happening in the world. And now on YouTube, I've decided to start live streaming every month, just to get also the interaction with people from different places to see what they think and how they feel about it. Because like you mentioned, it can be filtered through me. So it's one filter is, of course, like the news outlets. And then there's me who's getting it from them and having my own view. But at the same time, I, of course, am one person and I have my different perspectives, meaning like life experiences, but I can't see it from every angle. And I like, no one should have to. So I think coming up with this idea of having it live streamed on YouTube and people being able to chat in to me to say like, hey, yeah, this is what I think about the specific article that you're, talking about this at this moment, or whatever questions that they have, because then it does create this community. It's not just me, a talking head at you. It's we get a chance to discuss current topics that are happening. And I'm specifically doing it for Iceland because that's where it's easier for me to focus on. Otherwise, I feel like I'd be all over the place trying to do all the world news. But still, I think in this way, I'm breaking down the barrier of me just being this person, some authority on the news, when in reality, I'm a human like everyone else. And we get a chance to share with each other our thoughts. And then from there, we can kind of like, at least have the space for it, a safe space for it. And that's another thing I tell people all the time is, I'm not accepting of comments that are like discriminatory or racist or trying to tell other or tear other people down who have feelings about things. Mainly because, even if I don't agree with you on it, as long as it isn't hateful or something ridiculous, that's still your opinion. And because it is my channel, though, I can like take out the ones that I think would be harmful or are bordering on maybe something, was going on with this person that I'm not aware of. But regardless, I've still felt like this has been a really fun way of interacting. And that's just one way, for instance, of how I've been able to have transparency, but also build more of a community.
Yeah, and thank you so much for sharing. While you were saying, for me came this understanding very often we are fighting, I'm right, you're right, or something. But while you were saying, I understood that it's really, we can know the truth when we're gathering all opinions. Like when we are working together, it's not possible for one person to process everything and see everything from all the angles. So that's very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. And also, as we were talking about that, we have different, how to say that, different level of people, yes, different salaries, different statuses, and so on. And when we're talking about creative society, it's when all people are equal. We're taking equal responsibility for our society. We have equal rights. In your opinion, from whom this change should start? How can we implement this change that really all people can feel and be equal in our society?
Well, I mean, the majority of the people in the world are not the ones in power, and yet we have collectively the power, which is interesting. So I think it should start from the people. Like, to expect that it's going to happen from systems that are already existing that reward the people who have gotten to those levels in the systems for staying there and keeping the system running the way it is, to expect that they're going to be the ones to change it is not true and not going to happen for the majority of them. There are, of course, the rare politicians out there who, at least it feels like they're out there doing some good or trying and, doing their best to be transparent, like the AOCs of the world, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, for instance, like just of the one of so many, right? Meaning one out of so many politicians who I feel connected to. I'll just speak for myself. And at the same time, though, I mean, there aren't that many people who are thinking, wow, I have the power to say something, when we often have the power to vote. We often have the power to collectively write petitions or to protest or whatever. And a lot of the times we've been fed the idea that, we should be separated, like this group of people is different from you. So we end up becoming like the divide and conquer, as what happened in history, in essence. And over again, it's the same cycle. It's like history continuously repeats itself, that we feel disempowered. We feel that as one person in a community, we couldn't gather the community to realize that we're actually the ones in power and not the two people that we elected to be in those seats, right? So I think that is it's a big illusion, is what the word I was looking for, is that for whatever reasons, we have to rely on the governmental systems rather than dismantling a lot of these things and building up to what we want and demanding what we want, but also keeping each other accountable, because this is the other aspect of it, is that most of us are, and I'm speaking for myself too, we all can get to a point where we're like, I'm kind of tired, or like you just rely on what you know. And being, I think, part of a society, if we do want the things that we're talking about, is actually being responsible, being accountable, and then also being understanding that a lot of people need education in terms of how to critically think. A lot of people need access to resources before they're willing to even say that they will help to, change something, because they feel like at least they got a little bit of something from the people that they got, not realizing that there's a whole pie instead of just a crumb.
Great, thanks. And well that you mentioned this idea of power and the way it's currently working and the way it should maybe be changed. Because I would love you to be able to comment a little bit deeper on the eighth foundation, the last foundation of the creative society, which is the self-governing society. And I can give a bit of description to put into context. The concept of power in a creative society is absent, since the responsibility, and you mentioned it, everybody's responsible, for the society as a whole, its development, living condition, and harmonious format lies with each human. So that's really the idea that we already mentioned. But do you have anything else to comment on this, as it's really the last foundation of the creative society, the way we see the future for us?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's throughout history been proven that with so few having power, because power does have an effect on people. In fact, I was weirdly enough watching this TikTok video, right? As if like, it's weird how TikTok goes from being about dancing videos to all of a sudden there's like people on there educating individuals about history and whatever. And there were studies actually done and have continuously are being done about how when one person perceives that they have more power than over another person, they actually act differently. It's like there's changes in your brain regarding how you treat this other person, and you might feel more entitled to things just because you have more power. So just in the idea of spreading power around, or if you are a person that is heading up something, even like a committee, you do things to kind of keep yourself grounded. So it's not to say that like there couldn't be representatives for, housing or representatives for whatever, and still in a self-governing society, you know what I mean? Because it's like, do you need 4 people to be the ones who also do the one thing? There couldn't be like people who are responsible for things, what I'm getting at. But also putting into place tactics within the system that keeps people who might have some power, maybe a little bit more power than other people, being grounded and understanding what the main goal is, instead of there being an allowance of it becoming about just what that person wants and selfishness and like, in essence, boundaries sounds really important to me when it comes to something like this. And yeah, I don't know of a place that I can think of off the top of my head anyway, in the world where this happens that much, unless people are often on like a desert island and they've had to come up with their own rules or something. So I think it would be a huge change in mindset too, and conditioning for people when it comes to a self-governing society, in order to be in a place where we can actively do the things and create the things that we're talking about, and not just getting to a point where power starts to corrupt again and it falls back into the same cycle.
So much. And it's true, because if we are taking our system, right, we so often hear that one person, I will change something, but it's come out that only together we can make real change. Because otherwise, one person entitled with power, many things are changing for that person. And I would like to talk also, we were mentioning today about climate change. And today it's a real global issue and threat for all humanity. And climate change doesn't ask about nationality, doesn't ask about status or anything else. And in your opinion, how important is it in the face of this global climate change for people to unite and together to find the solution for these issues, regardless of our borders, languages, and everything else?
Yeah, it's one of the most important issues of our generation, I'd say. I mean, there's a lot of issues, including poverty and whatever else, that are up there. The fact of like, but then this also, I think when you think of smaller nations, say like Iceland, who doesn't have a lot of power in the world, and yet sees climate change so directly here. So like with the glaciers that are melting, and like there was a couple of years ago, a funeral for a glacier called Okjökull, and it was a purposeful thing where this group of people, they came together to show that they're having this memorial that this is happening much faster than any of us thought. And, places where the water is rising in their islands and they're losing the ability to like this, it's usually smaller places. It's usually people who are in the minority. If this were happening in much bigger, powerful places, it would be a different story, right? If it were like New York City underwater, people would react differently than the Maldives or something. You know what I mean? Like, it's just a totally different attitude toward it, even though there are people who live there and we've had hurricanes and they're like, all right, back to business, But I think some of these things have really woken people up. And for others, it still, for me, comes back to education in terms of the understanding about climate change, because there's a lot of misinformation. And so I can say till I'm blue in the face how important it is. But if there isn't an understanding of the people that you're talking to about what it is in the first place and how it's affecting people and how it's already affecting them, because a lot of people don't feel like it has any direct effect on them. Maybe their summer is hotter, and they're just like, oh, well, that wasn't as fun as I thought, but we still had summer, and it's just like, well, maybe this is a really bad sign, but it's not being explained this way to everybody. There are people, again, access to information, resources, and then people who just kind of come up with their own thing. So I do see climate change is very important, but I don't see that people can get to a point of making informed decisions if they're not informed. So there's like base levels of where you need to start, where depending on where the person's from, and I don't mean like the country they're from. I just mean literally it could be socioeconomic status, or it could just be pure ignorance of wanting to be informed about it. So there's a couple of different, in my opinion, factors that play into this, and the Gretas of the world, at least in the younger generations, are helping to bring about awareness. But I don't know if it's enough yet at the moment because of, again, higher powers not really taking it seriously, or their constituents not holding their feet to the fire to take it seriously.
Yeah, thanks for your vision once again, because you can really see things from your own eyes. Sometimes people maybe don't see climate change from their window, but in your case, from Iceland perspective, you can really see the changes already, what's happening. So it makes it even more real. And that information then you can transmit through your podcast is even more real because it's coming from an eyewitness. And I think that's very important. We actually have a video that we would like to share with you about the glaciers, and it's an extract from the conference that happened recently, Global Crisis, and it's typically on that topic that you already mentioned. So let's watch it together and maybe comment a little bit more on it after.
Everyone has already heard that glaciers are melting catastrophically fast, but have you heard about how exactly they are melting? 90% of all glaciers on the planet are located in Antarctica, where they are disappearing the fastest. What is striking is that this is taking place solely in the western part of Antarctica, whereas in the east, record-breaking cold temperatures are being recorded. A logical question arises: why is Antarctica melting only on one side? And the answer is quite simple. West Antarctica has a totally different geology. It consists of thin blocks of the Earth's crust that are separated from each other by large tectonic faults, rift zones. And in these zones, greater amounts of heat are released. For example, scientists from Germany and the British Antarctic Survey mapped the geothermal heat flow in West Antarctica using data from aeromagnetic observations beneath the Thwaites Glacier. They discovered an area where a huge amount of heat comes from the Earth's bowels. According to scientists, this is due to the fact that the glacier lies in a tectonic trench where the Earth's crust is much thinner. Surprisingly enough, West Antarctica is one of the largest volcanic regions on Earth. There are more than 140 volcanoes sleeping under the ice, and they are now much more active than the scientific community previously believed. A team of researchers from the University of Rhode Island discovered a new factor in the rapid melting of the Pine Island Glacier in Antarctica. It's an earlier unidentified active volcano buried deep beneath the ice. Evidence of volcanism was indicated by high concentrations of the helium isotope, which comes exclusively from the Earth's mantle. According to Professor Karen Haywood, geothermal heat from the West Antarctic Rift warms the ocean water. This in turn leads to the acceleration of ice sheet melting. Thus, it is the geothermal heat from volcanoes that is contributing to the rapid melting of the Antarctic ice sheet, not global warming at all. But why are there so many volcanoes under the ice of Antarctica? NASA experts have found out the reason based on data from NASA's IceSat and IceBridge satellites. They have concluded that under the surface of West Antarctica, there is a large mantle plume that is a flow of red-hot magma which rises and expands beneath the Earth's crust. According to the scientists' calculations, this area is warming with almost the same intensity as the Yellowstone supervolcano. The heat flux measures 150 milliwatts per square meter, reaching 180 in the rift areas. This is about 3 times as much heat as the adjacent rock layers receive. Thus, all indications are that glaciers in Antarctica are melting, not at all due to anthropogenic factors, but due to the volcanic heat. At the same time, the temperature of the Earth's crust is rising and parts of the territory are elevating abnormally. Why does the scientific community ignore the connection between all these phenomena? Equally intense ice melting is also taking place on another part of the planet, in Greenland. Research conducted in October 2020 showed that Greenland's ice is now melting faster than ever before in the past 12,000 years. In 2019 alone, Greenland's ice sheet lost the most ice in recorded history, 600 billion tons. It is also surprising that giant lakes appear under the surface of the glacier, which is actually 1.5 kilometers thick. As of today, we already know about 6 dozen subglacial lakes of Greenland. The temperature of the ice surrounding them is around minus 28 degrees Celsius. But these lakes do not freeze. Why? Several research groups of scientists joined in the effort to find an answer to this very question. They discovered the fact that under Greenland, just as under Antarctica, there is a mantle plume. Geothermal flows coming from its bowels cause formation of subglacial lakes and melting of glaciers. Using gravitational research, a team of American scientists led by Professor Ralph von Friese estimated the thickness of Greenland's crust. Active melting of glaciers has been observed in the northern part of the island, where the crust is thinner and an increased geothermal flow due to the rising mantle plume has been detected. Using seismic tomography data, scientists from an interdisciplinary team at the Schmidt Institute of Physics of the Earth saw that the flow of magma rises from the center of the core to the Earth's surface right beneath the central part of Greenland. This is where the largest number of subglacial lakes are located. The scientists have calculated the theoretical heat flux corresponding to this magma chamber and found that this heat is sufficient to warm the base of the glacier up to the melting point of the ice. These same results have been confirmed by similar studies using machine learning technology. It is obvious that the world's 2 largest glacial regions, Antarctica and Greenland, are melting because of increased geothermal flows coming from the interior of the planet. But what is intensifying them? Mantle plumes have been beneath the glaciers for millions of years, but it is today that their magma rises closer to the Earth's surface and causes increased heating of the Earth's crust from the inside. This indicates that abnormal processes are starting to occur in the bowels of the Earth, in its very core. And the main question is, why is it happening precisely now? This answer is simple. Cyclical changes on a planetary scale occurring every 12,000 years. The melting of glaciers is only a part of the chain of climatic events that will lead to an imminent catastrophe already in the near future. Today, it is extremely important to unite the entire world scientific community in order to thoroughly study the real causes of climate change and prevent a great tragedy.
So it would be nice if you could maybe comment on this video. Maybe tell us, is there any information you've been talking about glaciers and the fact that the glaciers are actually dying and melting down? Is the cause something you are aware of, or anything that you would like to say about this video?
Well, I think it's interesting because in the video, you can see that Iceland, all of Iceland, is over a mantle plume. So the same mantle plume that is spreading to Greenland is also under Iceland. And that's why Iceland has so much volcanic activity, actually. And at some point, Greenland and Iceland were connected before they split off and separated. And so it's not terribly surprising to see this, I guess. But it is interesting to hear this science. It's not like I've been fully following the mantle plume news regarding how it's been affecting Greenland. And yeah, I think makes sense. At the same time, I mean, we are aware of the amount of pollution in the world as well, and how that's causing issues too. And even the pollution from a volcano, which can be quite significant. We had a volcano that started in Iceland, what was it, 2 years ago, a year ago? Time's just so weird now with all that's been happening. But anyway, the anniversary of it starting is coming up. And that in itself, even though it did cause some pollution, it doesn't cause as much pollution as you would think when it comes to actual industries doing things, or like factory farming and all of that jazz. So I feel like that's one aspect that they're talking about regarding this mantle plume, because that's also where we get new land. So Iceland's a prime example. It's a very young country landmass wise than other places in the world. And Iceland is actually being ripped apart every day because it's on a mid-Atlantic rift, the ridge here. And so the Eurasian and North American tectonic plates meet here, and they are they're separating by 2 centimeters every year. But because of the mantle plume, it's actually filling in, the new lava fills in landmass in Iceland. So it's like pros and cons, right, of like being on a mantle plume. So yeah, I think I'm just more curious to learn more about all of this and all of the factors besides just the mantle plume.
Yeah, that's as we said, this video is from the conference, and it's really wonderful that nowadays there are scientists who are studying the real cause, what is happening with our planet, because as it was mentioned, that melting of glaciers is just one part of it, but we all can observe that there are many other climatic disasters, and it's so important that whole scientific community is uniting to find this real cause and how we can prevent all of this. And as we today were discussing about the consumer format of society we are living in, we see that it's not natural and not normal for a human to live in such conditions. And we all want to live in a society where everything is made for a person to have fulfilled life. And it's a greater society where we can implement the 8 foundations. So in your opinion, what every person can start with to foster, implement them, and to really make this global change?
Like I mentioned, knowing that collectively we are more powerful is something that's important. But the only issue that I potentially see, because some of my ideas are like being more informed. It's like, but if you don't have access to this information, how do you do that? But I would say in your society, if you see something that you feel like, in your community, I should say, if you see something that you feel like is wrong or not fair or equal, or whatever, utilizing you as an individual, banding together or trying to bring other people together to actually change it. And I think it's these usually small, what feels like grassroots type of organizations that actually can grow and become something much stronger. I mean, in essence, that's what you're doing, right? Creative Society is pretty much kind of like this, what I would assume started kind of like a grassroots type of aspect and has been growing in order to gain more people to do it. So I think realizing that each individual has more power than they think, and in order to bring about change, like utilizing your community and not trying to take it all on, because it is part of all of our responsibility if we want a society that is actually more equal. And if you know something, share it with others. So like Maya Angelou is one of my favorites authors, poets, and she always says, like, when you learn, teach, and when you get, give. So there isn't this always like, it's just for me. And, it's almost like you think you're going to run out of great ideas. Like there's an infinite amount of what you can give. There's an infinite amount of what you can learn and share. And so we all kind of have like the ability to do this and to see it as a collective movement, and to act in a way of it as a collective movement rather than just seeing it as, how can I better my own situation and my own self?
Great. Thank you very much. It's very right what you're saying. The same way that the human is the highest value, also the human is the answer and the solution to get that unity and face those crises that we can see. So thank you very much, Joel, for all your answers, all your insights. And maybe you would like to add something to our viewers on either the topic we've mentioned or anything else that you would like. Any last words?
Well, I'm quite the talker, so. But I'd say overall, I think, like I mentioned, it takes time to change things, but I feel like if there's actual investment and a personal want to do it, then it's possible. And that's where it comes from. And so if you do feel that strongly about wanting things to change, then know that you have power to do that and you don't have to do it alone.
Great. Thank you very much. So, dear viewers, we have now raised issues that really affect everyone because we are the only one to solve them. We are all in the same boat. No one can save us but ourselves. Mm-hmm. The heroes are you and me, who speak the truth and act to save all of humanity, who act to unite all of society. So therefore, we invite absolutely everyone to take part. Invite your friends and tell everyone about around you about the Creative Society, the 8th Foundation that we mentioned during this interview, because members, friends, we are people unite. Barrier immediately disappears.
Thank you so much. And I just would like to mention that today all the participants of the Creative Society project are preparing for the International Forum, Global Crisis, We Are People, We Want to Live. And this forum will take place on the 7th May, 2022. The main topics of the forum which will be raised are the real cause of global climate change, who is hiding the truth from people and why, climate disaster through eyes of eyewitnesses. Also, there will be about refugees, why does this affect really every person on our planet, about escalating social violence, slavery and trafficking. So if you are an expert in any of the above areas, or if you have some practical knowledge about consumeristic atrocities, human slavery, refugees, if you're eyewitness of the climate disaster, please get in touch with us, because who better can tell truth than you? And if you would like to take part in the discussion, join the preparation for the forum. Write to info@creativesociety.com, because Creative Society is really our project. It's a project of you. And thank you so much.